Too handsome, he said, right before HR slid the envelope across the glass table. But the real knife came later. 3 hours after firing me, my boss sent out a company-wide email implying I'd made women feel unsafe. Suddenly, I wasn't just unemployed. I was a predator in the rumor mill. 20 years of loyalty reduced to whispers and side eyes. They didn't just take my job, they torched my name. I almost let it ruin me. Almost. But what they didn't know? I had records. 2 decades of meticulous time-stamped records. And if you think I'm going down quiet, think again. My name is Evan Carver, and I'm 45 years old. I've spent 20 years building systems and revenue at Meridian Solutions, my professional home until last month. Steam rises from my 5 a.m. coffee as I stand in my kitchen, studying the mortgage balance on my fridge magnet and the thick college admission folder on my maple table. My daughter Sarah's future waiting to unfold. My boss Richard Chen's behavior had shifted lately, his eyes narrowing during meetings, his holiday party compliments dripping with hidden venom, always quick with those pointed jokes about office sunshine whenever I entered a room. What Richard doesn't know is that I've documented everything meticulously for 2 decades, every project archived, every decision time-stamped. A career built on attention to detail becomes its own shield. But let me start from the beginning. That Friday started like any other. Coffee ring on my desk calendar, email inbox cleared by 9. When Richard's assistant Sandra pinged me about an urgent 3 o'clock meeting, I actually thought it might be about the Morrison account I'd just landed. You know how your mind plays tricks, filling gaps with hope instead of warning signs? I knocked on Richard's office door at exactly 2:59 p.m. The glass walls that usually made our workspace feel open somehow made me think of a fishbowl now. Richard sat there, hands folded on his pristine desk, wearing that practiced smile that never quite reached his eyes. "Have a seat, Evan." He gestured to the chair across from him. The leather creaked under me as I sat down, and I caught a whiff of the leather polish they used weekly. Funny how details stick with you when your world's about to flip. Richard cleared his throat. "This isn't easy, but we need to discuss your impact on the office environment." He paused, probably expecting me to jump in. I didn't. 20 years of meetings had taught me when to let silence do the work. "The fact is, Evan, you're becoming too much of a distraction." He leaned forward, his voice dropping to what he probably thought was a sympathetic tone, particularly to our female staff members. I blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" "Your appearance, Evan. You're too handsome for this office environment. It's affecting productivity." For a moment, I thought I'd slipped into some bizarre parallel universe. "Richard, I've been here 20 years. My team just closed Morrison." He held up his hand. "This isn't about your performance. It's about protecting our workplace dynamics." He pressed a button on his desk phone. "Sandra, please send in Helen from HR." I hadn't even noticed Helen waiting outside. She glided in, manila envelope in hand, her face a mask of professional neutrality. The glass table reflected the fluorescent lights as she slid the termination letter toward me. My hands didn't shake as I picked it up. They should have, but somehow they knew this was time for evidence gathering. I read each line, cataloging the absurdity. Creating an unsuitable work environment, distracting presence, protecting staff comfort. The severance amount at the bottom was almost laughable. 3 weeks' pay for 20 years of service. "I'll need you to sign here," Helen said, pointing to a line at the bottom. I checked my watch instead. 3:17 p.m., February 12th. "Details matter when you're building a case." "I'll have my lawyer review it first," I said, folding the letter carefully and sliding it into my jacket pocket. Richard's jaw tightened. He'd expected compliance, not challenge. "Security will escort you to clear out your desk," Helen added, as if she were telling me about tomorrow's weather. I stood up slowly, my legs feeling like they'd aged 20 years in 20 minutes. 2 decades of building systems, mentoring teams, and solving crises, all reduced to too handsome. The bitter taste of humiliation rose in my throat. My desk looked exactly as I'd left it an hour ago. Family photo facing my chair, potted peace lily by my monitor, stack of project files neatly arranged. I placed the plant and photo frame in the box security provided, tucked my final paycheck envelope inside my jacket, and took one last look at the space I'd called home longer than my daughter had been alive. The elevator ride down was silent, just me and my reflection in the polished steel doors. How do you tell your daughter that her reliable dad, the one who built his life on steady competence, got fired for his looks? Sarah had 2 more months of high school left. College acceptance letter already pinned to her bulletin board. She trusted my reliability more than any words I'd ever said. Standing in the late afternoon heat of the parking lot, I pulled out the termination letter again. The words, "distraction to female staff," jumped out at me as the sun dipped toward the horizon. My watch read 4:03 p.m., the exact moment my professional identity became a punchline. My key rattled in the front door lock, a sound that usually meant home safe, but now felt hollow. Inside, the house was too quiet, with just the kitchen clock doing its steady tick-tick-tick. Sarah was at volleyball practice, thank God. I needed these hours alone to figure out how to tell her. I dropped the cardboard box on the counter right next to yesterday's mail. That cream-colored envelope from State University sat there unopened, probably containing her final tuition bill. Some cosmic joke, putting it next to my termination papers. My phone buzzed again. The 10th time since I'd left the office. I pulled it out, watching the notifications pile up like digital sympathy cards. "Hey man, just heard. You okay? Can't believe they did that to you. Call me when you can." Then came the group chat ping. I shouldn't have looked, but you know how it goes. The marketing team's chat was lit up. Dave, guess who got too hot for corporate? Angela, office charm finally backfired. Marcus, at least he's got his looks to fall back on. My stomach clenched. 20 years of building respect. And in 3 hours, I'd become water cooler entertainment. The leftover coffee smell from morning hit me different now. That ordinary, reliable scent suddenly a reminder of everything stable I'd just lost. The fridge hummed in that empty house way that makes you notice every sound. I grabbed the tuition envelope, finally tearing it open. The number at the bottom might as well have been flashing in neon. $21,750. Due date, March 30th. 46 days. I walked to the calendar on the wall, the one Sarah and I used to track her college prep deadlines, and circled March 30th in red. The marker squeaked against the glossy paper. That circle looked like a countdown timer on a bomb. The kitchen table became my war room. I grabbed a legal pad and started bullet pointing everything, word for word from that termination letter. Creating unsuitable work environment through physical presence, distracting impact on female staff members, protecting workplace productivity and comfort. Severance, 3 weeks, after 20 years? The absurdity of it hit me fresh with each line. How do you even fight something like this? My appearance wasn't exactly something I could correct. My laptop pinged. New email. The subject line made my blood run cold. FW. About boundaries. It was from Janet in accounting, someone I'd worked with for 15 years. The forward was from Richard to the department heads. In light of recent events, I want to address concerns about professional conduct. While we cannot discuss specific cases, it's important that all staff feel safe expressing discomfort about unwanted attention. The clock struck midnight as I read it. There it was, the shift from too handsome to something darker. Richard wasn't just firing me, he was rewriting my whole history. I looked at Sarah's college acceptance letter, still stuck to the fridge with her volleyball team magnet. She'd worked so hard for that spot, trusted that her dad had the tuition handled. The panic I'd been holding back started rising in my chest like acid. Tomorrow, I'd need to start making calls. Lawyers, HR specialists, maybe even my old mentor Mark, who'd retired last year. But tonight, watching my phone light up with more messages I couldn't bear to read. All I could do was sit in my quiet kitchen and watch 20 years of reputation transform into whispered scandal. The tuition bill seemed to glow under the kitchen light. 46 days. The clock kept ticking, each sound like a footstep moving me further from who I used to be. Monday morning, 8:15 a.m. I'd timed it perfectly. Early enough to catch HR before their usual meeting block, late enough to avoid the main employee rush. The security guard's expression when I handed over my visitor badge said it all. News travels fast. The HR waiting area hadn't changed in 20 years. Same faded motivational posters, same fake plant in the corner that Paula from Benefits watered religiously every Tuesday. Funny how you notice these details when you're sitting on the wrong side of the desk. "Mr. Carver?" Monica Chen, senior HR partner, appeared in the doorway. I'd known her for 12 years, watched her rise from coordinator to partner. Now she wore that professional mask they must teach in HR school. Pleasant but distant, like she was handling radioactive material. "Please come in." I had my statement ready, printed on clean paper, dated and time-stamped. Call it habit. But documentation had always been my security blanket. "I'd like to formally request clarification on several points from Friday's termination," I said, sliding the paper across her desk. Monica maintained perfect eye contact, the kind that's so steady it becomes unsettling. We understand this is difficult, Evan. However, the company has a duty to maintain a safe and comfortable workplace environment for all employees. There it was. Safe. That word hit like a sucker punch. You know that moment when puzzle pieces click together and show you a picture you wish you hadn't seen? I've led successful projects here for 2 decades, I said, keeping my voice level. I'd like to understand what specific incidents prompted this action. She folded her hands on the desk. We take all reports of inappropriate conduct seriously. While I cannot discuss specific complaints, I want to assure you the decision wasn't made lightly. Inappropriate conduct? The coffee I'd had earlier turned sour in my stomach. My termination letter cited physical appearance as the reason. Company policy requires us to address any situation that impacts workplace comfort. Her words came out smooth, rehearsed. Multiple staff members expressed concerns about interactions. Right then, through her office window, I saw Sarah from marketing walk past. She'd been on my team for 5 years. We'd pulled all-nighters together during the Williams account crisis last spring. But when our eyes met, she quickly looked away and hurried past. The reality clicked. This wasn't just about being too handsome. They were painting me as a predator. I pulled out my phone, opened my calendar. The Williams Project, March 2022. Sarah led creative, Lisa handled client relations. We had 43 team meetings, all documented. Every session recorded on Zoom. Evan, Monica's tone shifted to gentle warning. Reviewing past projects won't change the current situation. Down the hall, Lisa herself appeared, saw me through the glass, and immediately turned around. 20 years of professional relationships, vaporized by whatever story they'd been fed. I recognized Richard's handiwork now. My boss hadn't just fired me. He'd poisoned the well. Every woman I'd worked with was being told I'd crossed lines. Every professional relationship reframed as something sinister. I'd like to submit a formal appeal, I said, pulling out another document. I have records of every project, every meeting, every email, exchange. The decision is final, Monica cut in. We recommend focusing on your transition rather than attempting to relitigate the past. The sunlight through her window felt too bright suddenly. 20 years of building trust, leading teams, mentoring new hires. All of it now viewed through a warped lens. Every success I'd earned now scanned as manipulation. I stood up slowly, gathering my papers. Thank you for your time. Walking out through the office hallway felt like moving through molasses. Faces turned away, conversations stopped. People I'd shared celebrations with couldn't meet my eyes. Outside, the morning sun hit me like a spotlight. My phone buzzed. A text from Tom, a junior analyst I'd trained last year. Hey man, heard some concerning things. Just wanted to check if you're okay? Sounds rough. I stared at those words, feeling the full weight of what Richard had done. He hadn't just taken my job, he'd turned my whole professional history into a weapon against me. How do you fight a smear that HR has basically laminated with official stamps? The phone buzzed again. Another concerned message, this time from someone in operations. Each ping felt less like sympathy, and more like nails in a reputation coffin. I spent that evening like a lawyer prepping for court, spreading papers across my kitchen table. The familiar scent of my Focus Blend coffee, dark roast with a hint of chicory, kept me company as I built my case. Remember those times you wished you'd kept better records? This wasn't one of them. Let's see you spin this, Richard, I muttered, pulling up my meticulously organized digital archives. 20 years of habit paying off in one night. First came the project timeline spreadsheet. Every major deliverable I'd overseen, color-coded by department with meeting attendees listed. Funny how those distracting interactions were always group sessions, always recorded, always focused on work. I added timestamps, Zoom links, and calendar invites. A paper trail that painted professionalism, not charm. The performance reviews came next. Exceptional leadership, strategic thinking, team-first mentality. Year after year of concrete results, not one mention of anything inappropriate. I attached the latest 5 reviews, each signed by different supervisors. Hard to claim I'd flirted my way to success when the numbers told such a clear story. You know what really gets me? I had to stay clinical about it. Every time anger crept into my typing, I deleted whole paragraphs. No emotional language, no accusations, just facts. Dates, numbers, results. Let the evidence do the heavy lifting. I pulled up commendation emails from clients. The Morrison account turnaround, the Williams campaign launch, the Henderson portfolio restructuring. Each one showcasing competence, not charisma. Each one time-stamped, documented, and witnessed by entire teams. Clear, Concise, factual, I reminded myself, massaging my temples. The coffee had gone cold, but I barely noticed. Around 11:30 p.m., I did one final review. The rebuttal ran 15 pages, but every single claim had backup. I'd even included HR's own metrics on my team's productivity. Funny how a distraction led the company's most efficient department 5 years running. Hit send at 11:57 p.m. Not that timing mattered, but habits die hard. Then came the gut punch, job hunting. I opened LinkedIn Indeed. All the usual suspects. Each application form felt like a trap. Reason for leaving previous position? How do you explain being too handsome without sounding delusional? And references? Richard had poisoned that well thoroughly. The truth hit hard. Until I cleared my name, every application would carry this shadow. I grabbed my notepad, the same one I'd used for 20 years of meeting notes, and wrote in block letters, "Clear name before securing work." My eyes drifted to the ethics hotline number I dug up earlier. Not a solution, but maybe a pressure valve. I scheduled the call for 9 a.m. sharp. Companies love these hotlines. They make great window dressing. But I'd seen enough corporate politics to know they rarely change anything. Still, it was one more documented attempt at proper channels. One more piece of evidence I'd tried to play it straight. Walking to the fridge, I stared at my calendar. The dates seemed to blur together, except for one box marked in red. Tuition deadline. The weight behind my eyes built until the numbers swam. I'd never missed a payment for anything in my life. The thought of failing my daughter now. My laptop clicked shut with a finality that matched my shaky breath. I set my alarm for 5 a.m. Crisis or not, routine matters. Tomorrow would bring the institutional brush-off I expected. We take your concerns seriously, and we'll look into it. But tonight, I had my facts in order. 20 years of documented excellence versus one man's jealous lies. I walked past the mirror in my hallway without looking. Appearance had never been my weapon. Precision was. And Richard was about to learn exactly how sharp that blade could be. The response hit my inbox at 10:17 a.m. sharp. Probably took HR longer to craft their carefully neutral language than to actually read my 15 pages of evidence. You know the kind of corporate speak I mean, where every sentence is designed to say nothing while sounding official. After careful review, thorough consideration, decision stands. My coffee turned bitter in my mouth as I scrolled through their artfully empty paragraphs. Not a single specific point addressed. Not one piece of evidence acknowledged. Just corporate cotton candy, all air and no substance. I set my mug down harder than I meant to, leaving a coffee ring on my notepad. That'll tell you how rattled I was. 20 years of keeping my desk pristine, and now I was marking up my own papers like a rookie. Time to call in some markers. First up was Dave Thompson over at Meridian Systems. We'd worked together on 3 major integration projects, saved each other's bacon more than once. The kind of connection you figure will always be solid. "Hey Dave, Evan here. Got a minute?" "Evan. Yeah, bit tied up right now." His voice had that careful distance, like he was handling something fragile. Or toxic. "Maybe we could circle back next week?" The same dance played out with Sarah at Westbrook Solutions. "Oh, Evan. Things are just so crazy here." She trailed off, leaving awkward silence where a referral should have been. "You ever notice how circle back is corporate speak for never gonna happen?" I pulled up my rebuttal again, reading it with fresh eyes. Even the cleanest facts can sound defensive if you let emotion creep in. I started trimming, line by line. Despite the baseless nature of these claims became, the following evidence demonstrates. Obviously false allegations transformed to available documentation shows. Surgical precision, no passion, just the kind of editing I used to do on quarterly reports. Around 2 o'clock, the walls started closing in. You know that feeling when you need to just breathe? I grabbed my jacket. Early October, still warm, enough for just a light layer, and headed out. The neighborhood was quiet, just the occasional car passing. Perfect for thinking. 20 years of building relationships, and one whisper campaign was unraveling them like cheap sweaters. Every potential lifeline seemed pre-frayed by whatever story Richard was spinning. The smear was working exactly as designed, not destroying me outright, just slowly squeezing off my options. I stopped at the little park where I used to take my daughter. The same bench was still there, weathered but solid. Kind of like me, I guess. The familiar creak of its wooden slats brought back memories of Saturday mornings. Her small hand in mine as we planned adventures. Quiet men survive storms, I muttered to myself. It was something my father used to say. usually while fixing something complicated in his workshop. They survive by charting, not shouting. Back at my desk, I opened a fresh document. Time to rebuild my resume from the ground up. Lead with systems architecture, the inventory tracking platform that saved the company millions. Highlight revenue stabilization, 8 straight quarters of growth during the market downturn. Focus on the skeleton of success, not the flesh of relationships. I checked my watch, 4:45 p.m. Still time to get applications out before business hours ended. Each cover letter was a masterpiece of understatement, each resume a testament to provable achievements. No mention of team dynamics or interpersonal skills, just cold, hard results. The sun was setting as I hit send on the last application. 6 companies, 6 shots at salvaging my career. Each one felt like throwing a message in a bottle into an ocean of whispers. My phone buzzed. Another LinkedIn connection had gone dark. The network I'd built was evaporating, faster than morning dew. But numbers don't evaporate. Results don't fade. And somewhere in this industry, someone still cared more about bottom lines than backroom gossip. I just had to find them before the tuition deadline found me. After sending that last application, I couldn't put it off anymore. That tuition bill had been sitting on my kitchen table like a ticking bomb for 3 days. My hands actually trembled a bit when I picked up the envelope. Funny how a simple piece of paper can feel so heavy. You know those moments when reality hits you square between the eyes? This was one of those. The number stared back at me. $24,150 for the first semester. Due date, November 15th. I grabbed my phone and pulled up the calendar. October 4th today. Did the math twice, though I already knew what I'd find. 6 weeks, I muttered, the words tasting bitter. Just 6 damn weeks. I stood up and walked to the fridge where my magnetic calendar hung. The same one where I'd been marking off mortgage payments for years, watching that balance shrink. Now it had a new purpose. I grabbed a black Sharpie, the thick kind you can't ignore, and wrote 6 weeks in block letters right across November 15th. Underlined it twice. The kind of reminder you can't pretend not to see when you're grabbing milk for your morning coffee. Remember those old westerns where they'd show a countdown to high noon? That's what my kitchen felt like now. Every tick of the clock seemed louder. I pulled out my laptop and opened a fresh spreadsheet. Time to get surgical with the budget. Netflix? Gone. Gym membership? Suspended. That weekly takeout tradition with Sarah? Had to go. The column of numbers got leaner by the minute, but even stripped down to the bones, it wasn't enough. Not by half. The cursor blinked at me from a new email draft. How do you tell your kid, your straight A, never gave you trouble kid, that the one thing you promised might not happen on schedule? I must have rewritten that first line 20 times. Hey sweetheart, quick update on the tuition situation? No, too casual. I wanted to discuss some temporary adjustments. Too corporate. Finally settled on. Things are a bit complicated with the payment timeline, but I'm working on solutions. Nothing for you to worry about. Just keep focusing on your studies. Dad's got this handled. Even as I typed, Dad's got this handled, my stomach clenched. You ever make a promise you're not sure you can keep, but breaking it isn't an option? That's where I was living now. I grabbed my old Franklin planner. Yeah, I still use one of those, and mapped out a daily battle plan. 8 a.m., 3 job applications. 10 a.m., follow-up calls. 1 p.m., document review and rebuttal updates. The schedule was military precise because it had to be. Every hour wasted was another brick in the wall between my daughter and her future. The rebuttal file on my desktop had grown to 42 pages. Every meeting note, every performance review, every commendation letter, all cataloged and cross-referenced. If Richard wanted to play the long game, fine, I'd be ready. At the bottom of my planner page, I drew a line and labeled it Plan B. The blank space below it seemed to mock me. In 20 years of planning, I'd always had a backup strategy. Now, that empty line felt like staring into an abyss. A cool evening breeze pushed through the house, making the front door creak. That same creak I'd been meaning to fix for months. Amazing how normal house sounds can suddenly feel like warnings when your world's uncertain. The clock showed 9:30 p.m., earlier than my usual bedtime. But tomorrow needed every ounce of focus I could give it. I took one last look at that calendar, at those block letters screaming 6 weeks in the dim kitchen light. Even after I clicked off the lights, those words seemed to glow like emergency exit signs in the dark. 6 weeks to save everything I'd promised. 6 weeks to prove 20 years of reliability wasn't a lie. Sleep wouldn't come easy, but it had to come. Tomorrow was already burning daylight. The Paradise Diner hadn't changed in 15 years. Same cracked vinyl booths, same coffee-stained menus, same fluorescent buzz overhead. At 7 a.m. sharp, I spotted Mark in our old corner spot, already working on what had to be his second cup of coffee. The sight of him brought back memories of project deadlines and late-night strategy sessions, back when he was steering me through office politics I was too green to see. "You look like hell, kid," he said as I slid into the booth. His steel-gray hair was shorter than I remembered, but those hawk eyes hadn't dulled a bit. Not feeling much better than I look, I managed a weak smile. "Thanks for meeting me, Mark. It's been a minute." The waitress swung by, coffee pot ready. I nodded, and she filled my cup without a word. Some places just know the morning crowd doesn't want small talk. "So," Mark said, pulling out a leather-bound notepad that had to be as old as our friendship. "Walk me through it. Every detail." I'd forgotten how he did this. Total focus, like each word might crack the case. I pulled out the HR letter and started from the top. As I talked, his eyebrows drew closer together, especially when I hit the distraction parts. His pen never stopped moving. "The women in the office," he cut in. "The ones they're saying you influenced? Any of them work in accounts?" "3 of them. Jennifer in AP, Susan handling vendor relations, and Maria in compliance." His voice had that old sergeant's edge I remembered. "Yeah. How'd you know?" He ignored my question. "These last 6 months, did Richard ever reassign any of their usual approvals? Take anything off their plates that they normally handled?" The question hit me like a splash of cold water. Come to think of it, yeah. He moved all the Westbrook invoices to his direct review. Said it was about streamlining processes. Mark's pen stopped. "And the quarterly compliance checks?" "Those too. Right after the Meyer account went south." The pieces were starting to align in my head, but I couldn't quite see the picture. "One more thing," Mark said, leaning forward. His voice dropped so low I had to strain to hear it over the diner's morning clatter. "That new software system you built last year, the one that flags irregular payment patterns, did Richard ever actually implement it?" "No." My coffee had gone cold, forgotten. "He kept saying we needed more testing. More." The words died in my throat as 20 years of numbers and patterns crystallized into one ugly truth. Mark sat back, his face grim. "You're not a distraction, Evan. You're a witness they needed gone." "The Westbrook account," I whispered. "The Meyer dealings. All those delayed audits. Your boy Richard's been cooking books so long he probably thinks he invented the recipe." Mark's tone was matter of fact, like he was reading me a weather report. "But you built systems that could catch it. You trained women who could spot it. And worst of all, you're competent enough to prove it." My hands started to shake, not from fear, from a fury so clean it felt like ice in my veins. "All this time," I said, "while I'm worrying about looking too good for the office, he's been using your looks as a smokescreen," Mark finished. "Classic misdirection. Make everyone so uncomfortable about your appearance that nobody looks at the numbers." Pretty clever, actually. He didn't sound impressed, just clinical. "Those women," I said, "their reputations, collateral damage." Mark's pen scratched across his notepad again. "He needed them distracted, demoted, or doubtful enough to miss the patterns. And you? You were the perfect scapegoat. The handsome devil who charmed his way through approvals." The fluorescent lights suddenly felt too bright, the coffee too bitter in my mouth. Every uncomfortable joke, every shifted responsibility, every streamlined process of the past year snapped into focus like evidence photos. "How long have you known?" I asked. "Suspected since the Meyer account. Confirmed it last month when 3 other managers got pushed out the same way. Different pretexts, same pattern." Mark tapped his notepad. "Richard's not just hiding fraud, Evan. He's building a fortress of lies, and you were getting too close to the walls." That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, watching shadows from passing cars slide across the popcorn texture. You ever notice how exhaustion hits differently when it's mixed with betrayal? It's heavier somehow, like gravity's working overtime just to mess with you. The whole thing felt unreal, like one of those fever dreams where nothing adds up but everything's connected. My mind kept drifting to Amy's college orientation photos, the ones she'd texted last month. Her smile was so bright, so sure that her dad had everything handled. Now here I was, stretched out in the dark, wondering if I should just swallow my pride and let Richard's lies stand. Maybe silence was the smarter play. The memory of her campus visit hit me hard. That perfect autumn afternoon when we'd walked the quad together, leaves crunching under our feet, her eyes wide with possibility. I'd promised her then that nothing would stop her dreams. Nothing. Mark's words from the diner kept echoing. You were removed because you notice things. The phrase bounced around my skull until sleep felt impossible. With a grunt, I swung my legs off the bed and padded to my home office. The external hard drive hummed to life when I plugged it in. My insurance policy from day one. 20 years of meticulous documentation. Because something in my gut had always said, keep records. The familiar folder structure appeared. Projects, financials, compliance reviews. Each one a brick in the wall of my career. Now maybe something more. My phone buzzed. Mark's text was typically brief. Start with vendor 14B. I remembered that vendor, Westbrook Solutions. Their invoices had always been clockwork regular until Richard took over direct oversight. The urge to crawl back into bed, to pretend this was all a bad dream, pulled at me like quicksand. But Amy's face floated in my mind, along with the tuition deadline circled in red on my calendar. Instead of giving in, I found myself reaching for my desk drawer, pulling out a legal pad and 3 freshly sharpened pencils. The ritual reminded me of exam prep in college. Same yellow paper, same wooden pencils with pristinely pointed tips. Some habits stick with you. I started a checklist. The clock read 11:43 p.m. Setting my phone alarm for 5:30 a.m. felt like making a pact with myself. One deep dive into the numbers before sunrise. That's all I was promising, even if it turned up nothing, even if it cost me another night's sleep. I opened the first spreadsheet, the familiar grid of numbers offering a strange comfort. 20 years of watching patterns had taught me that truth hides in the quiet spaces between transactions, in the subtle shifts that most people miss. My pencil hovered over the legal pad as I pulled up the Westbrook files. A sort of calm settled over me, the kind that comes when you stop running and turn to face what's chasing you. The numbers were waiting. And this time, I wasn't just looking at them as a systems analyst. I was looking at them as a man with nothing left to lose. I felt a flutter of anxiety in my stomach, but my hand was steady as I wrote the date at the top of the page. The streetlight outside cast just enough glow through the blinds to illuminate my workspace. In that moment, surrounded by papers and powered by a mix of desperation and determination, I made myself a promise. By sunrise, I'd either have the first thread of proof or know for certain I was chasing ghosts. The familiar smell of pencil shavings brought back memories of late-night study sessions in college, when everything seemed simpler, but the stakes felt just as high. Now, with my daughter's future and my reputation hanging in the balance, I opened the first file and began to read. I'd always been a morning person, but that 5:30 alarm felt different. My eyes were gritty from last night's research, but my mind was already spinning up like an old engine that knows its job. The kitchen was still dark when I poured my coffee. You know that pre-dawn quiet, when it feels like you're the only person awake in the world? That's when I do my best thinking. Always has been. My laptop screen lit up the home office as I pulled up vendor 14B, Westbrook Solutions. Their payment history stretched back 3 years. Neat as you please. Too neat, actually. The regularity caught my eye. Same amount, same day each month, like clockwork. 20 years in systems teaches you that perfect patterns usually hide messy truths. I started digging into the approval chain. Richard had taken direct oversight 18 months ago, right when the payments to Westbrook doubled. But here's where it got interesting. Westbrook itself was just a front, a paper company that existed mainly to route money somewhere else. The payments disappeared into a maze of subsidiaries before landing in accounts that were conveniently off our main ledger. Got you? I muttered, taking my first sip of coffee as dawn started painting the sky outside. The quarterly summaries were where Richard got sloppy. He'd buried the extra funds under pilot programs. Vague initiatives that never seemed to produce results but kept drawing resources. I pulled up email timestamps and matched them against invoice edits. The pattern was clear as day. Every time a payment went out, Richard's digital fingerprints were all over the paperwork. Around 8, I started building what I called my kindergarten chain, laying out the evidence so simply that even someone with no financial background could connect the dots. Email A leads to change. B leads to payment. C. No room for confusion or doubt. You ever have one of those moments when everything suddenly clicks into place? When I saw the full picture, I actually laughed out loud. This wasn't about me being too handsome or distracting anyone. That was just theater. A smokescreen. Richard needed me gone because I was the one person who might notice his creative accounting. 20 years of watching numbers had made me dangerous. Birds were chirping outside now as I methodically photographed every damning screen. Each click of my phone's camera felt like another nail in Richard's coffin. I created a simple index: dates, descriptions, reference numbers. The kind of clean documentation that makes auditors smile. The steady tap of my keyboard filled the room as I logged each new piece of evidence. My shoulders had unknotted for the first time in weeks. This wasn't just about clearing my name anymore. This was about exposing a fraud that had been hiding in plain sight. Remember that old saying about sunlight being the best disinfectant? By late afternoon, I had enough sunlight to sterilize a hospital. The numbers told a story that no amount of corporate smooth talk could explain away. Private account transfers, inflated invoices, phantom services, all of it documented and time-stamped. Richard hadn't just been cooking the books. He'd been running a full gourmet kitchen. As midnight approached, I exported everything into one massive spreadsheet. Named it Sequence A, because simple is always better. The USB drive blinked as it copied the file. 3 years of fraud condensed into one tidy package. My eyes were burning as I finally closed the laptop. The house was silent again. That special kind of quiet that comes when you've just changed everything, but the world doesn't know it yet. I knew I needed to decide my next move, but that would have to wait for morning. You never make good decisions when you're running on coffee and righteousness. I set my phone alarm again before heading to bed. The familiar weight of sleeplessness pulled at me, but something else pushed back. A certainty I hadn't felt since that Friday in Richard's office. Tomorrow would need a clear head. Fear has a way of resetting your resolve with each sunrise, and I couldn't afford to hesitate now that I had proof. I met Mark at 7 the next morning in an empty office park lot, the kind where even the pigeons look bored. He pulled up in his weathered Volvo, right on time like always. Some habits stick with you long after retirement, I guess. You look like you haven't slept, he said, sliding into the passenger seat of my car. Found everything you suggested in Vendor 14B, and then some. I handed him the USB drive. Take a look. Mark plugged it into his laptop, and I watched his eyebrows inch higher as he scrolled through my index. You know that satisfied look old pros get when evidence lines up exactly how they suspected? That's what crossed his face. Clean work, he said, nodding. Simple enough for the regulators to follow, detailed enough to hold up. You documented the approval chain? Every step, plus timestamps and system logs. He pulled out a fresh drive, one of those encrypted ones with military-grade protection, and started copying the files. We'll use this one for the regulators. Keeps it professional, shows we're serious about security. The morning sun caught the frost on my windshield while we waited for the transfer to complete. Somewhere in the distance, a truck backed up, its beeping echoing off empty buildings. Remember, Mark said, the cover letter needs to be brief. Just the facts, timeline, and contact details. Let the evidence do the talking. Back home, I spent an hour crafting that letter. Kept it to one page, used bullet points for clarity. Listed the key findings without emotional language. Just straight reporting of what the numbers showed. Added my contact information and a short paragraph explaining my position and recent termination. Around noon, I double-checked the regulatory agency's intake process on their website. They had a secure upload system for whistleblower submissions. I created an account, verified my email, and started the upload. Watching that progress bar felt like the longest 3 minutes of my life. You ever notice how the biggest moments often feel the most ordinary? Just clicking submit on a website. But I knew it would set off alarms in at least 3 departments once someone opened that file. I didn't let myself pause. Drove straight to my lawyer's office with the HR termination letter and my timeline. She'd already drafted the wrongful termination lawsuit, just waiting for my green light. We went through it one last time, making sure every detail matched my documentation. Ready? She asked. I nodded, and she filed electronically right there, just like that. Another progress bar, another irreversible step. The rest of the afternoon I spent making copies. Call me old-fashioned, but I believe in redundancy. Printed everything. The regulatory submission, the lawsuit, all the delivery confirmations. Filed them in 3 separate locations. You never know when a backup might save you. When I finally got home, the house felt different. Quieter, but not in that hollow way it had been since the firing. More like the quiet after you've finally said something that needed saying. I charged my phone and turned the ringer volume all the way up. Any unknown number now could be a regulator or a lawyer. Couldn't afford to miss those calls. That fireproof envelope I bought last year for my daughter's college acceptance letters seemed fitting to use it now. I slipped the backup USB inside and set it on my desk. The router blinked in the corner, its steady green light the only illumination I left on. Standing there in the dark, I thought about that moment in Richard's office when he'd smiled while firing me. Wonder if he was smiling now? Probably. He didn't know yet that the ground had shifted under his feet. You spend 20 years building something. You learn patience. You learn that sometimes the biggest victories start with a simple upload, a filed document, a blinking light in the dark that means something's moving forward. I left the room exactly like that. Just the router light blinking, the envelope waiting, and the phone charging. Tomorrow would bring whatever it brought. Tonight was for breathing and knowing I'd finally pushed back. I was pouring my second cup of coffee when the call came. A DC area code I didn't recognize. My hand actually trembled a bit as I answered. Funny how your body knows when something big is happening, even before your mind catches up. Mr. Carver? The woman's voice was crisp, professional. This is Sandra Martinez from the Financial Regulatory Commission. We've reviewed your submission and would like to schedule an interview. Would tomorrow morning at 9 work for you? You know that feeling when a plan starts moving faster than you expected? My coffee sat forgotten as I grabbed my planner. Yes, 9 works perfectly. Excellent. Please bring any additional documentation you feel might be relevant. She rattled off an address downtown, then added, "And Mr. Carver? Thank you for bringing this to our attention." I spent the next few hours preparing like it was the biggest presentation of my career. Remember those 3-ring binders we used to make for client meetings? I put together something similar. Tab-divided sections for each questionable transaction. Color-coded sticky notes marking key dates. The kind of detail work that had always made Richard roll his eyes and call me obsessive. The regulatory building looked exactly like you'd expect. All glass and steel, with security that reminded me of airport checkpoints. I arrived 30 minutes early, but they took me right up. Sandra Martinez turned out to be younger than I expected. Maybe mid-30s, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. 2 other agents sat with her, laptops open. "Walk us through the approval process for vendor payments," she started. And just like that, we were off. I kept my answers clean and direct. Richard insisted on personally approving any vendor payment over $50,000. He created a special routing code, 14B, that bypassed normal accounting channels. And where would we find records of these transactions? The main server, accounting subdirectory. There's a hidden folder labeled Pilot Programs. I've included the pathway in my documentation. For 2 hours, they led me through it step by step. I could see them connecting dots, building their case. When they finally wrapped up, Sandra walked me to the elevator. "We'll be in touch," she said. "Please keep your schedule flexible." Walking to my car, I checked my voicemail. A message from someone at the Business Journal made my stomach tighten. "Mr. Carver, we're working on a story about allegations of financial impropriety at your former company. Would appreciate your comment." I deleted it without calling back. Let the documents do the talking. That had been Mark's advice from the start. Besides, you ever notice how the people who love microphones usually end up regretting it? By evening, the story was up on their website. Sources with extensive documentation allege systematic financial misconduct. The article was careful, filled with allegedlys and reportedlys, but the core was there. My phone buzzed with a text from Jenny in accounting. "Oh my God, Evan. I'm so sorry we all bought into, well, should have known better." Before I could respond, another one came through from Mike in operations. "Holy shit. Is this why? Man, I don't even know what to say." I appreciated the support but kept my responses brief. This wasn't about collecting apologies or playing told you so. There was still work to do. Speaking of work, I spent the next few hours organizing my notes into potential testimony points. Used that old presentation template from my corporate days, breaking everything into clear, digestible chunks. The kind of prep that had always made Richard impatient. "Just wing it, Evan. That's what real leaders do." Midnight rolled around, and I was about to power down when my phone lit up one last time. A calendar invite from Sandra Martinez, with an official case number in the subject line. The investigation was officially moving forward. I sat there in my home office, looking at that case number. Remember how I told you about wanting to clear my name? This wasn't exactly how I'd planned it, but sometimes the path to clearing your name runs straight through someone else's lies. My phone buzzed at 5:47 a.m. Normally, I'd have been up anyway, but I'd barely slept. You know that wired feeling when your mind won't shut off? Yeah, that was me all night. The Business Journal notification made my hand freeze mid-reach for coffee. Breaking: Richard Matthews indicted on multiple fraud charges. Below that was his company headshot. That same smug smile he'd worn while firing me. I sat down hard in my kitchen chair. The one that still creaked the same way it had when this whole mess started. The article was comprehensive. Federal prosecutors had filed a 17-count indictment. Terms like systematic fraud and misappropriation of funds jumped off the screen. You ever have one of those moments where relief and vindication hit you so hard you actually feel dizzy? My coffee went cold while I read through it twice, then 3 times. The formal notice arrived in my email 10 minutes later. Stark black text, confirming what the news already trumpeted. But here's the thing about karma. Sometimes it brings friends. By mid-morning, the op-ed started dropping. The Business Ethics Review didn't pull any punches. Matthews represents the worst of corporate culture. A manager who weaponized HR policies to remove competent oversight while orchestrating systematic fraud. They branded him ethically radioactive and unemployable in any position of trust. Remember how fast rumors spread when they were targeting me? This was like that, but with artillery support. Every hour brought new revelations, new condemnations. Former colleagues who'd avoided me were suddenly sharing links and adding fire emojis. My lawyer called around 11. The wrongful termination suit is proceeding exactly as we hoped. HR has already moved to settle. More importantly, she paused here, and I could hear papers shuffling. They're formally retracting all implied misconduct. Your professional record is officially clear. I thanked her, hung up, and just sat there for a minute, letting it sink in. The same kitchen where I'd stared at that first HR letter now held different weight. The morning sun hit the same spot on my counter where I'd set down that insulting severance offer. But I had somewhere to be. I'd promised Sarah I'd meet her at the college gates at 2 o'clock. The drive up was surreal. You know how some victories don't feel real until you actually do something concrete with them? The campus was alive with move-in day energy. Kids hauling boxes, parents taking photos. That particular mix of excitement and anxiety that hangs in the air. I spotted Sarah near the administration building, bouncing on her toes the way she used to do before soccer games when she was little. "Dad!" She threw her arms around me like I was returning from war. In a way, maybe I was. The bursar's office was quiet compared to the chaos outside. I pulled out my checkbook. Yeah, old school, I know. And wrote the full tuition amount. The clerk processed it and handed me the receipt with a smile that had probably seen thousands of proud parent moments just like this. We walked back outside into that perfect late summer breeze that only seems to exist on college campuses. Sarah was chattering about her roommate and class schedule, but for a moment, I just stood there, holding that receipt. Funny how a simple piece of paper can feel like a battle flag, isn't it? The wind tugged at the corner of the receipt, and I felt something settle in my chest. Not just relief, but something steadier. Pride, maybe, or vindication. Sarah's smile caught the sunlight, and I understood exactly what all those sleepless nights and careful documentation had bought. Not just justice, but this moment, right here. I lifted the receipt one last time, remembering Richard's face when he'd tried to reduce me to nothing more than a distraction. The words came out soft, more to myself than anyone else. Jealousy destroys its own master.